Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Vered Kogan, and I'm super excited to introduce you to a very special guest, Joshua Miller. Josh is a master certified executive and personal coach, an Amazon bestselling author, as well as a TEDx speaker, LinkedIn top influencer, and contributing writer for major industry-related journals like Thrive Global and Medium. His career experience has spanned both the advertising world and the world of leadership and organizational development. Now, I connected with Josh as a fellow Forbes Coaches Council contributor. And one of the things that captured my attention as I learned more about him is his experience in the arena of coaching and using questions to expand possibilities. In fact, one of his highly popular LinkedIn learning courses is called Using Questions to Foster Critical Thinking and Curiosity. And it ranked number 6 of all the courses worldwide offered by LinkedIn in 2022, which is awesome. So Josh, I am super excited to speak with you today. I think this is such an important topic. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm very excited to just jump right in and get into it because I think that this topic is phenomenal. It's one that transcends time. It transcends culture, ethnicity. It's something that we all experience, but we're all not present to the experience. So I am really happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's do it. Let's dive right in.
Sure.
So how about we start with kind of the end in mind? What is one thing that you want to make sure that our listeners and viewers take away from this conversation?
That knowledge is deemed as having the right answers, but intelligence, which is something we can all work on and build, is about asking the right questions. That's where I would like to wind up, because we're all very skilled in different areas of our lives, but there's always room for us to improve. And I think today we can talk about mindset, and specifically from a coaching perspective, how to use questions to foster more success, more happiness. So that's where I'd like to end.
Awesome. So Tell us more, what do you mean by fostering questions, or using questions to foster curiosity? Like, what kind of questions are we talking about?
Well, I think for most people, we use the term open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. And I talk about that in my course, in my LinkedIn learning course, but I'll use that as an example because I think it's one that most people are probably familiar with. So when you're asking closed-ended questions, they're usually clarifying questions. You're looking for a yes, no, right? So as a coach, you want to understand, did that person receive the message? Are they learning? Is there an anchor of some sort? Open-ended questions is really about getting curious. It's about understanding and learning depth of a situation, of a person, of an experience, of a feeling, of an emotion. And so those two types of questions can give you varying degrees of success and answers as it relates to what you're trying to find. And often we don't use those questions enough. And as a coach, we're trained to ask both those types of questions in various forms when we're working with individuals, leaders, executives, et cetera, so we can ascertain, are they with us? Are we taking them along the conversation? Are they learning? Are they listening? Are they present? And so those two types of questions, I would say open-ended and closed-ended, I work with clients all the time because they're actually very easy to start to apply in real time. There's not there's not a big barrier, and it can shift your mindset very quickly, right? From not knowing or not understanding or having some level of uncertainty to getting that clarification and immediately feeling more positive or more happy or more secure about yourself or the situation. So closed-ended questions, open-ended questions, that's the foundation for asking questions to really have a better or more fulfilling life.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
So can you give our audience maybe some examples of what you mean by open-ended questions?
Yeah. So what typically happens, this is very common, and I kind of miss this, the days of working in corporate America. When you're in an office, you'll walk by somebody and they'll be like, "Hey, how you doing?" And they just keep walking, right? Now you could argue that could be a closed-ended question, an open-ended question, or just a horrible question. Or, "Hey, how was your weekend?" And they don't listen, or they just kind of keep moving on, right? That's like the throwaway questions. An open-ended question could be something as simple as, if I'm asking my wife, what would you like for dinner? What are you feeling? What are you in the mood for, right? In terms of X, Y, and Z. That would be open-ended. Clarifying would be, I'm thinking we should have pizza tonight for dinner. What do you think? Right. And so I'm giving a very basic example, but we use these interchangeably all day long and we're not aware of them, which again goes back to the mindset. As a coach, the biggest thing that I work on with leaders, executives, individuals, become present, slow down and become present. And I know we could talk about, mindfulness and tactics to do that, but everything starts and stops from your level of presence. When you are not present, you're missing everything. You're missing a lot. So asking these types of questions when you're not coming from a place of being present, you won't get the results that you're looking for. So working on those simple open-ended and closed-ended questions with a level of presence, with a level of intentionality, can really be the game changer for people when it comes to interviewing, promotions, showing up at work, virtual, hybrid, or otherwise. Yeah.
I think it's so cool that you connected the concept of kind of open-ended questions, place of curiosity, to presence, because I think that true, genuine presence is letting go of our own agenda, which requires us to let go of having things be a certain way, right? Like black or white, right? Or no, and really just being present and curious to hear what the other person has to share. And when we ask an open-ended question, it has kind of an implicit invitation to have somebody look beyond maybe their own kind of yes, no kind of thinking, right? Beyond that, and to consider or imagine new possibilities. And so I just think that it's a beautiful gift to give to other people and ultimately to ourselves, because as they expand possibilities, we can co-create a new conversation, a new reality for us. So tell us more. Tell us more. What do you think is maybe some tactics or some suggestions around using this beautiful tool of questions?
Yeah, I want to just say there's 3 words that you just stated that are so powerful. Co-creation, right? If you're going to be present and engage with another person, yes, there are times where you will drive the conversation. It will be more of maybe a monologue versus a dialogue. But if you're really looking to create partnership, relationship, or connectivity, it's a co-created. You also use one of my favorite words, which is magic. I just think that word, my kids love that. I think there's so much in the word magic. It's kind of what my coach always tells me. If there's one word you can't scream, like you can't be angry and say, it's bubbles. I've never met somebody who try to say bubbles like in a very angry tone. You just can't do it. Magic has that same kind of visceral reaction to me. So it was co-created, it was magic, and there was one other word I already forgot because I said the word bubbles. Possibility. Everything about mindset, and at least for me as a coach, is about taking my clients on a journey to what's possible. And usually what's possible sits on the other side of what they don't believe is possible, right? That's the work we have to do and the work we choose to do. Now, you asked me a question and about curiosity. I mentioned to you this before when we were talking. Curiosity and humility are 2 sides of the same coin. In order to be curious, this goes back to what I said earlier, you have to be present. But presence requires a level of humility. You have to give up something to get something. And in this case, I'll speak from experience. Before I was a coach 23 years ago, I was an arrogant, this very entitled New York City person, grew up there, thought the world was mine. I knew everything. And I will not lie to you, the first weekend in my first coach's training, it was awakening for me. I mean, I realized very quickly, wow, I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know it. And I'm about to go on a year-long journey of learning. And I say that from a place of humility. I say it from a place of ownership, because I think that it's important we have to own our faults, right? Our misgivings, our gaps, the areas that we need to grow, so that we can be present with other people. And I'll explain, and I am, and as a coach, I'm sure you know this, but we can't be, right, just in general, coaches or not coaches, we can't be with other people's stuff, right, if we can't be with it in ourselves. That's why we get triggered, right? The thing that always is like somebody walks in the room and they're really happy. You're like, oh my God, why is that person so happy? Like, God forbid, why are they happy? They're just happy. What is it that you can't be with that person, right? And we all have egos. We all deal with this stuff. But Why is that important? Because you have to work through that. You have to be present. To be present means you have to be humble. To humble means you have to be vulnerable. You have to be open. And that takes work. I know, I'll speak for myself. It is work I work on every single day, every week with my coach of 23 years. It gets easier, but we're still hardwired to feel insecure, right? We're hardwired to resist uncertainty or threat, all of the ways that our brains are hardwired. But I do believe that when we can be present, when we can be humble, we can be open to receiving, we can connect, we can co-create, we can create magic, we can see what's possible for ourselves and others. And asking those questions as a coach is the key that unlocks that for people. So it's a combination. The questions are the vehicle, but who we're being, how we have to show up is humble, vulnerable, curious, and be able to hold a space for people. That's what we do as coaches, is to hold that space no matter what comes our way and be able to address it in a meaningful, respectful, professional, and loving manner. I'm not sure if I over answered your question, but you got me excited. And, I think sometimes what happens is people don't always know this about me, but I'm a very big, almost nerd when it comes to coaching and everything about it. This is just what people say, oh, what you do for a living as a coach. No, who I am is I'm also a father and I'm a husband and I'm a brother and a son, all that stuff. But working with people, developing people, using questions, right? Being curious, why people do what they do, right? Why do people do what they do? Everybody is unique and we're all different, and we also are very, very similar, but everybody's unique. I look at it every time I work with a client, it's a Rubik's Cube. And by the way, I'm not good with Rubik's Cubes, so probably not a good metaphor, but everybody comes in a Rubik's Cube. And my job is to kind of just, okay, like what color are we trying to figure out, right? So questions, all that stuff, it helps. It helps to unlock it.
Yeah, that's a cool metaphor. And, what's coming to mind is, really what we're talking about here is how each of us can, in essence, kind of first and foremost, coach ourselves.
Sure.
Right? Be very patient and curious and humble with ourselves.
Yeah.
And, and some of the questions that we can ask ourselves to help us be there, are open-ended questions.
Yeah.
And one of those open-ended questions might be, what am I feeling right now?
Yes. And we live in a world, in a society that, and I can speak as a man, we're not necessarily conditioned to be so self-expressed. I am very self-expressed, probably to a fault, as my coach will tell me, or my wife sometimes. But what I've learned is that all the years that I held my self-expression in, it robbed me of being present in my life with those that I care about and love. And it took losing my dad to terminal cancer when I was 20 years old. When I found out that he was, when I was 19, and I was in my senior year in college, and my parents let me know that, he was sick, and I'll make the story very short. I had to come to terms with a lot. I had to come to terms with a lot of feelings. And this is before I knew coaching or any of that stuff. And there was a lot that I suppressed for a variety of reasons. One was it was a coping mechanism. I needed to graduate college. I could not be derailed. My parents didn't want me to come home and see my dad frail, because they knew that my mind would just be checked out. I wouldn't be able to get back to work and finish graduating university. And when I graduated, they gave my father 6 weeks to live, basically. He wound up living almost 14 months. He wound up living long enough to see me graduate college, and then he deteriorated. But the beauty of it is that I managed to spend every moment I had with him before he passed. And that was kind of a precursor. I didn't realize it until I got older. It was a precursor to teaching me how to be vulnerable, how to open up. And if you've got emotions, let them out responsibly, of course, but you can't hold back things that it's not sustainable in life. And when I work with leaders and individuals and they're having challenges in their career professionally, one of the things we always look at is, where's that showing up personally? Oh, well, no, we don't need to look at my personal life. Let's focus on my job. well, you're the same person here as you are over here. So we're going to look at the dots, right? You understand this. I know that. And one of the things that I have found over 23 years of coaching is that not being self-expressed is not a sustainable solution to winning life. You have to learn how to express yourself. And questions, obviously, it can be a big part of that. It can teach you how to knowing how to ask the right questions can help you understand and ascertain information so you can express yourself in a more personal, professional way. So again, you got me going off on a tangent here, but it's just the question is so profound and so powerful. I think when we talk about mindset, we talk about coaching, we talk about this topic, it's really about being and becoming. It's not so much about having and getting, right? And we are living in a world that's so fast paced where we're like, give it to me now, especially younger generations. They don't have the time or the patience to slow down and be present. And as a result, they're not expressing themselves. Or to the point in our earlier conversation, in my TED Talk, I talked about that we are a society that is using emojis, right? We are overusing emojis. We are under communicating and in ways that we should be more meaningful connection. It's quite upsetting, to be honest. I think that there's such a huge opportunity for us to reconnect with ourselves in the world we're living in right now.
Yeah, and questions is a beautiful way to do that, to kind of safely open that door. And one of the really cool questions that you brought up is, where else is this showing up in my life? And I'm grateful that you asked that, because we do have certain patterns. How we show up, as you said, in one area is we show up in all areas, because it's our strategy. It's our kind of intuitive, automatic patterns. And once we can become conscious of that and curious about it, rather than like judgmental, but just kind of curious, then we can begin to be like, right? What if I chose a different response here? What if I chose to ask this question, or to, just be very mindful about how somebody else might be feeling right now, or what they're experiencing, right? Whatever that might be. I think that can open so many doors. And I'm so sorry for the loss of your dad. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you for letting me share it. Thank you for giving me the space to share it. You bring up, there's two things you bring up that are really important. One is recognizing that everybody is going through something. And this is pre-pandemic, but the pandemic has, I always say that the pandemic hasn't so much changed anything, it accelerated what was coming. So in many ways, what we are experiencing now in the last 2 years, and we don't talk enough about it, but the impact of working from home for a lot of people has not been great, right? In HR and talent development, leadership development, we talk often about best ways to work in hybrid environments and remote working, and all of that is important and critical and needed. There's a mental health capacity, there's a well-being and a wellness capacity, there's a mindset shift that a lot of people have not been able to make for a variety of reasons. And I think it's important to recognize that we're all, working it out. We all are a work in progress. And the question though about, where else does this show up in your life? That's a question I probably use every single day. Every day. Because if you think about it, whatever we're doing in one area, we're doing a version or a variation of it somewhere else. And as a coach, I'm sure you fully know that when you're working with someone, you're looking for patterns, right? You're looking for what are the behavioral patterns or habits that are existing in one area or another area. And then you can start to, as I call it, find the four corners of the puzzle, right? Because once you've got those, then you can kind of work your way in. So
that's cool. And so from a leadership lens, because I know you work with a lot of senior leaders, what are some questions that leaders can either ask themselves or their team members to get even better results?
So one of the easiest questions I think a leader can ask anybody on their team is, what do you need? Just what do you need? It's not what support do you need? It's not how can I help you? It's what do you need? It is intentionally designed that way. Oftentimes I have clients and leaders who will struggle with that. Well, I can't, it doesn't work. I need to say, what is it you want? Or how can I help you with this project? Eventually I can get them back to a place where they understand the intention, it's open-ended, it is broad-based. You're showing empathy, humility, potentially compassion, right? So there's a level of EQ, but you're also putting the other person in an opportunity to think critically, think strategically, give a moment to breathe, pause. What do they need? You'd be surprised. It's not, the answer you get may not always be, I need help with this project. It may be, I need a day off. I need time, right? I need, who knows? And so that's probably one of my favorite. I'll get back to this question, but one of the other things I think is also to teach leaders and executives and people who are very busy and, you know, always on the gun and don't have a lot of time, how to teach them to slow down and get curious, is they have to pause for 3 seconds before answering any question. I love this practice area. And it never phases me that some people still get tripped up on it. But that one is a great one because it forces people intentionally to, okay, 3 seconds. Okay. And now I'll answer your question. To go back to your question though, another thing that a manager or a leader can ask is, it's more just, how are you doing? Now, some cultures, both corporate and maybe otherwise, may think that that's not a question you should ask. And so there's varying degrees on that one. I believe that being related is critical to building trust. Right. So how are you doing is a question that is intentionally vague, but it's also opening up to getting someone to respond. Someone could just say, I'm okay. Okay, let it be. Or did you have a good weekend? Right. So there's questions you can ask that will elicit a response that is not all about work. It's just on a human level. Like, how are you doing? How was your weekend? But don't say it in the, how was your weekend? And then walk by somebody. Say it like, hey, how was your weekend? People will tell you verbally and non-verbally if they don't want to talk to you. I know this. And because people have told me, oh, Josh, your face tells me you don't want to talk to me. But it's also really important, right? Because we are now relegated to these little squares. I'm looking at you in this little square, you're looking at me. So our brains are having to work overtime to understand what's going on outside of that frame, literally thinking outside the box. So the cues, right? The cues, the nonverbal, the verbal cues that we can give somebody in these little Zoom windows have never been more important. So asking questions that will elicit a response, forget about micro expressions and all that good stuff. Like, hey, how are you doing? That could be the thing that someone needs to hear. It's not always, let's get right into it. So much of my work with leaders over the last 2 years has been more around just listening empathetically, compassionately, what's going on in their lives? How are they handling and managing the change, the disruption, the acceleration? So asking sometimes a question that gets to the heart of the matter is great. Like, how was your weekend? But again, as you said perfectly before, you got to ask like you care. Don't ask like it's a toss away question. People are smart. They will sense that and they will not like that. So
I agree with that. I just so love that you kind of brought up, it's a human connection, human to human, right? We kind of take the hat off of manager or leader, employee, whatever that is. Yeah. And I care about you.
Yes.
And that is energetic. People can feel that. Their nervous system will pick up on that.
Yes.
And so when we can set an intention to truly be present, right? To allow ourselves the time to do that, right? In our schedule. So we're not headed off, let's say, to another meeting and we just don't have the time for the answer, but to truly listen, right? Yeah. And as you know, in coaching, we've got different levels of listening.
Of course.
So listening for the words, listening for the energy, the body language, the tone of voice, just kind of noticing what's important to the other person, what they need, as you said so beautifully. And of course, then using that information, not necessarily to fix anything.
No.
Even if it's just to mirror that back. That can be pretty profound for people as well, because they don't even notice. Sometimes
they don't even know what they're saying.
Yeah.
I think if people say, oh, what do you do as a coach? Or one of the components that I explain is I listen for context and content simultaneously, right? As a listener, as a coach, our training is we hear, right? So there's hearing and there's listening. We hear the noise, we hear the words. but we're listening for the emotional resonation, the core, like where is that coming from? Who are they being about what they're saying? And when you connect to your point like that, it's very powerful. It can be incredibly moving. And listening for what someone tells you. I was on a call 2 days ago, and the person was trying to convince me, this was not a client, it was just someone I was talking to, that everything is okay. Everything was okay. And all I did was intentionally listen to this person. I did not ask really many questions at all. Just said, okay, got it, right? Wow, that must have been hard. Okay. Fast forward 15, 17 minutes in the conversation, the person started breaking down and crying. This person was dealing with a lot of stuff. It broke my heart because I get it. Right? I understand. I can be with that person. And it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's worth it because just listening to somebody can cause a breakthrough for somebody else. And as a coach, we know this, right? We can also teach this to leaders, to kids, to parents, right? It's a transferable skill to cause a shift in someone just by listening to them. I know we're talking about questions, but just listen to someone in a way where you can hold a space that they feel comfortable enough to eventually let their guard down. Now that can be vulnerable, right? We go back to the humility, the vulnerability piece. Yeah, it's just the work is fulfilling, and it's also energetically it can make you very alive, and it can also you have to replenish yourself.
And
Something.
you know, when you said the work is, it's like I wanted to jump in and say the word love.
Yeah.
Because when we are genuinely present with ourselves or others, and I say ourselves because we can ask ourselves the same question: how am I doing? What do I need? Right?
Yeah.
And being patient with our answers, and of course, using that to set some boundaries and take some actions for ourselves. And you know, when we can truly just be present with somebody and listen, as you said, take those 3 seconds and just really be with the person, the content of the question is kind of less relevant than the energy with which it is asked. So for those people listening that are like, okay, what's the perfect question? Yes, there are certain best practices like open-ended versus closed-ended and so on. But as you're saying, it's really the energy with which we express that question.
Yes.
And also the willingness to listen to the answer and really be with it and let the person be with how they are doing, with what's showing up for them.
Yeah. I mean, to everyone listening, I think you just said it beautifully. Right? People want the quick fix. Tell me the question. What's the question? How do I get the job? What's the interview? How do I get the raise, the relationship, the love, this, that, and the other thing? There is no one answer. There is no right question. It's always going to be the different variables that will cause different outcomes. I often talk about there's control and there's influence, right? Forget about control. Just focus on what you can influence. What you can influence is your state of being, how you show up, your energy, right? Your mindset, your level of presence. When people say, Josh, tell me what are the 5 questions I need to know for this, that, what I often say to them is forget about the questions. Write out the 3 or 5 things that you can't stand in other people, and then go find those people or go be with that stuff until you can't be with it anymore. Well, why? But that's not the questions. I said, yeah, I understand. But in order to ask the question, which goes back to your point, you've got to be able to ask questions in a meaningful way where you can listen, you can respond, you can react, you can take in what's there. Otherwise, you're just asking a question. That's a doing thing. We're talking about being. So go be with the things you can't till you break it down in yourself. That's the work that people need to do. And let me be clear, that's not easy work, right? This is why people hire coaches to help them, break down those barriers, attack the blind spots. But what's on the other side is freedom, a sense of self, knowing who you are, knowing what you like. You said something before that was brilliant. It was about setting boundaries, like asking yourself, actually, what do I need? I am very clear that my self-care and self-preservation is my number one priority. I take care of my family, my kids. I am active in every part of my life which is all intentional. But how I'm able to do that is by setting boundaries. I'm always asking myself, Josh, what do you need? What are you not getting? What do you need more of or less of? What do you need to get rid of, cut out? People, places, and stuff. What do you need more of? Is it sleep? Is it vitamins? Is it love? Is it conversation? Is it connection? For the people listening, these are things that you can do right now. Get in conversation with yourself. Ask yourself, what do you need? Which goes back to the question I asked before. You asked me, and I said, this is what leaders can. What do you need? It can be very profound, right? I mean, just asking a simple question and not rushing to the answer.
I thank you for bringing all these, ideas up and inviting people to really connect with their own needs, other people's needs, and looking beyond, underneath the problem of the day to the real issue at heart. And, to your point around kind of being with, let's say people you can't stand or behaviors of people that you can't stand, that's kind of cool to think about, because those behaviors in other people are, in some level, projections of something perhaps that's a blind spot in us, right? Something that's deeply unconscious for us to come to resolution on. So when we can kind of accept that and be with it and be curious about it, oftentimes what will happen is that we will begin to have some insight as to what that's about. What do we believe about that? What do we expect? Right. And some of that might be true, and some of that might not even be true. It might just be a story that we're telling ourselves.
It could be. Yeah.
And so I think that was brilliant as well. And so, Josh, anything kind of that before we kind of complete our conversation that you want to leave our listeners with to, just live an even richer, more fulfilling, more authentic life?
The one thing we can't get back in life is time. It's finite. And the one thing that you can influence is how you use your time. So for the people listening that are not in a place that they want to be in right now, I invite you to do something about it. I invite you to get curious and take action, because now is the time. There will never be the perfect time. There's just now. I want to leave you with something that is just, when Einstein died, when he was 70, I think 75 or 76 years old, what they found on a table next to him, and I don't know if many people know this, he was working on math equations literally until the moment he passed. And, he understood until the day that he passed that being curious and living in a growth mindset and pushing the boundaries was the most important thing. And we are all born, all of us are born with certain skills. But it's the mindset we have toward improving those skills and our character that's ultimately going to determine the success and the trajectory of our life. And every single one listening, including you and including me, have that power and that ability. And I hope we all take it. That's what I want to leave people with. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Josh. And how can people learn more about your courses, about your work?
Yeah, thank you so much. Easiest thing to do is follow me on LinkedIn. You can get my course through LinkedIn Learning. You can also go to my website, which is Josh H. Miller. People always forget the H, joshhmiller.com. But even through LinkedIn, you can find me. I'm very active there, and that's probably the best place. But, more than anything else, I just want to thank you for having me on your show. Having these kinds of conversations are the most fulfilling and rewarding. And I love having these types of interviews and these dialogues. So thank you so much. It's been a real honor and a pleasure.
Oh, for me as well. And I'm so grateful, for kind of these last words that you shared as well, because I too believe that it is absolutely possible for everyone, no matter where they're at, how happy or unhappy they are in this moment as they're listening. It is absolutely possible to create change. And it starts with curiosity, and it starts with questions and a whole lot of self-love and compassion. So thank you for giving that energy to our world, teaching people how to do it. And I really hope that people engage and get to experience that for themselves. So thank you.
You're welcome.